guys, how's it going? So the other week I finished reading, I think about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I finished reading my 10th book in Chinese. So what I thought would be useful today is basically go over the 10 books that I've read, what I thought, where I got them from, etc. And then maybe go over some of my plans for what I'm going to read in the future. And the reason I wanted to do this is, one, I think when you're first getting into reading books, especially if you're trying to get into like more stuff from actual China or Taiwan, you want to get into more authentic stuff that's originally in Chinese, it can be hard to know where to start. You can probably, everyone's heard of things like, The Art of War, Journey to the West, stuff like that, but then a lot of those like classics are super difficult, and it can be difficult to know where to find good, interesting, more contemporary stuff. And it's something that I searched around a lot for and struggled a lot to find good stuff. I ended up asking teachers, friends, looking online, blogs and stuff like that, and I've found some pretty good stuff so far. I've also found some stuff that maybe didn't go so well, and the second reason is just so I can show you where I've got a lot of the books that I've read from. I've made videos in the past of how to get stuff, of how to do in Kobo, and then I can basically show you like how much I'm reading from where, and hopefully give you some ideas of where to find stuff in the future. And also the other thing is, because you can see I've ordered them from 1 to 10, and this is basically from the first one I've read to the last one I've read, so you can get an idea of sort of difficulty, I guess. If you're just starting out, if you're a bit better, then maybe you can figure out, maybe get some good recommendations for you to read in the future. And I think I'm going to keep on doing this in the future, so when I've read another 10 books, I'll probably do a list for 11 to 20 and so on and so forth. So first of all, the first book I read is a book called The Linguist by Steve Kaufman, and you can see the Chinese translation is Yu Yin Jia. And basically this was bought off of the Linguist website here, and I'll leave a link to this Google Docs in the description where I'm tracking what I've read, and also all of these hyperlinks to where I've actually got the books from. So this is basically bought off Steve's blog. As you can see here, you go down to the book and it's not free, it's $7 US, and I don't think it's too expensive. It was fine for me, and it's a very interesting book. I read it in Spanish as well, so it helps me understand from context. I think one thing I want to say is, I think when you're first starting off, novels can be a bit hard, and a lot of very specific non-fiction can be quite difficult if it's something about a complicated topic like history or something like that. But things that I think are quite easy are like autobiographies, or like self-help books, or just like actually books about how to do something specific. Like in this case, Steve's books about how to learn languages, the mindset of a language learner, and his adventure going through Europe and working in different countries and so on. So this is actually quite relatively easy. I think when you're reading the introduction and you read the first chapter, it comes across as it's going to be very difficult, because in his first book he tells the story of Xuanzhe and the crooked tree, and how that ties into Taoism, and also Steve's beliefs about language learning, and that's in chapter 1. I think the first chapter is really complicated, because there's a lot of words to do with the story and to do with specific words about Taoism and things like that. But then after that, I think it gets a lot easier. But the book's split into 3 main parts, but then it's also got an introduction and a bit at the end. But the first part is the adventure of the linguist, Steve's adventure, his autobiography, why he learnt languages, what he did for work, and his story travelling around different countries. This, I think, is the most interesting part of the book. I really enjoyed it, and it's not too complicated. I think the most difficult part for me was just, all the different cities and place names, because he's went to a lot of different countries. But, again, I was reading on Kindle and I could look these stuff up fairly fine. And then part 2 is the attitude of the linguist, and part 3 is how to learn languages. And yeah, all in all, I think it was a great book to start with. It wasn't too difficult, so I definitely recommend it. Going on to number 2 on the list, the second one I read was a book called Sha Fu, and that was because I've heard a lot of people recommend it. It's been referenced as a classic novel to come out of Taiwan, so I'm obviously more interested in Taiwanese culture than China, because I'm living here in Taiwan at the moment. So I thought, okay, and it's also got the story of a wife who starts off getting abused by her butcher husband, and then as you can tell from the name, eventually things escalate, and so I'm not going to talk about the end of the book, but yeah, and the reason I picked this at the start is because I thought it would be like a thriller. I thought the chapters would be very short. Well, the chapters are very short, so it's good reading length. And it's got some sort of, because it's the husband's a butcher, it's got some sort of useful words that I can use in my vegan outreach. So that's the reason I picked it. But the thing is, this book's like really, really old, and I found it really, really difficult. I could only just about follow the gist of what was going on, even with looking up a lot of words. So although the book's quite short, it's like 4 pages, and just to tell you what these numbers mean, that's number here is 4 pages a chapter, and it's 10 chapters long. So it's on the first chapter was 4 pages, and it's 10 chapters long. I think in all it was like maybe 80 pages or something. So I thought it wouldn't be that difficult, but I was completely wrong. I read this, it was really difficult. I didn't really understand that well what was going on. So I think, unless you're interested in Taiwan and you've got quite a high level in Chinese, I wouldn't recommend reading this. And also, this book was from howdo.net, which, if I just click on the link through here, it's a website where you can get and download ebooks for free in traditional Chinese. So again, I'll leave a link to my video in the description explaining how to download books from howdo.com, and then hopefully that you can find that useful in the future. The next book is The Little Prince, and I don't think that needs any introduction. It's quite a common starter book for people to read when they're getting into learning a new language. So again, not too difficult, short chapters, really enjoyable read. Didn't take very long because the chapters are so short. I would think I was reading like 3 or 4 chapters a day, and then in like a week or 2, I think it was about a week, I finished it in. So that was really good. Again, it's from Howdo, so I'll leave a link in the description. And this next is actually a book, and I'll just click through to their website here. It's actually a book, and they've got a few here. They've got so they've got a few books here, and these 2 are books, and this is just quotes down here. But it's basically about promoting vegetarian diets in a vegetarian world and stuff. So it's a lot of it's talking about animal agriculture. I didn't read the second one yet. I've only read the first one, but they've basically got the ebook here for free, which you can download in a Word document, and they've also got a audiobook as well for free. So I downloaded both, I listened to and read it, and I think I created quite a lot of Anki cards going through this. And again, the reason I wanted to read this was because I thought I'd have a lot of useful vocab for me to go through my outreach. So, unless you're interested in learning more about how animal agriculture works and the cruel practice behind it, or unless you're interested in vegetarianism or veganism, then you're probably not going to enjoy this book. All in all, I knew a lot of what they were saying in English already, so it kind of helped through context of figuring it out, and it was just reading at the Chinese equivalent of it, so that helped a lot with comprehension. So unless that's something you're interested in, you're probably not going to enjoy this book, but if it is, then I'd recommend it. It's free, it's got full audio, so yeah, and that was about 40 pages total, so again, that's quite a short book. To this next book, and again, this is from howdo.net, so you can download it for free. It's a book called Huozhe, and this, I think, probably is one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book that I've read so far on this list. This is a book set in China, and I think if I remember right, I found out the name from a blog. I think it might have been Hacking Chinese, I'm not 100% sure, but they basically recommended this book, saying it wasn't too hard for beginners. It's set in China just before World War II, and the guy is growing up, he's addicted to gambling, and then it's the story following his life from quite a young adult, and then it follows him through all the different stages of life to eventually when he's an old man. And it's as the book starts off, the narrator meets this old man, the main character, in this field, talking to this old cow, shouting and calling all these names, and then the old man starts to recall the story of his life, and then from then it's just like a normal novel, and it's basically retelling how this guy's life played out and all the things that happened, all the hardships and stuff he's faced over the years. And I think this is really, I like this for a few reasons. I think number one, it ties into a few events that actually happened in Chinese history, such as the Civil War and stuff like that. Number two, the language wasn't too simple, the language wasn't too complicated, the grammar wasn't too complicated. It was just, when I couldn't understand stuff, it was mostly to do with wording. And number three, I think it was written really well. It follows, the character, and you really start to become attached to the guy's family, or the surrounding characters, and when stuff goes wrong, and there is quite a few sad moments in the book. I think I really felt it, so I think this was really, really good. And another plus for this is it has a movie, and the movie is, again, it's a Chinese movie, not Taiwanese, so it's in standard Mandarin accent. But because I read the book, I could still understand it fairly well. I will say, having read the book first and watching the movie after, I didn't actually enjoy the film that much, because I feel like a lot of details were left out of the film that were in the book. So I feel like, sometimes when I was watching the film, if I'd only watched the film, I wouldn't really be too sure why it was happening or what was going on. But because I've read the novel, it goes into a lot more of the surrounding detail. And yeah, I think all in all, the difficulty was really good, the story was really good, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I'd highly recommend anyone who's looking to get into Chinese novels like that originally in Chinese. I'd highly recommend this book. And the only one I'd read before that point was, again, Shafu, but Shafu was way, way, way too difficult, whereas this one was a lot more manageable, so I'd highly recommend it. Then on to book 6. So again, this is another non-fiction book about language learning, and I think if you're reading non-fiction books about the topic like language learning, it's not actually that difficult, and especially if you read around the same sort of topic as before, it again becomes even easier the next one you read. So I found this even easier to read than Steve's book, because I'd read a lot of stuff before that. I'd already read Steve's book, and a lot of similar sort of languages coming up. So this one was actually bought off Amazon.com. So I just bought the Kindle edition and just dropped it straight into my Kindle and read it on that. And this is Benny Lewis's book Fluent in 3 months. In terms of difficulty and ability, I think it was quite interesting. It was interesting to read more about Benny. The difficulty level, again, it wasn't too difficult, so I think that was good. The bad points, I don't think the book was written very well. I think when I was reading the book, I got the feeling of that he was just running out of stuff to say. So whereas I read Steve's book, it really followed his whole journey, and he painted this really interesting story that really motivated me to learn languages. With Benny's book, there was some bits like that, but then he was in this, it was mostly going over about tips of how to learn, and he'd say stuff like, look out for cognates between 2 languages, and then he'd just have 5 or 6 pages listing examples of cognates, and he'd do that with almost every tip he gave. He'd just do pages of examples that I felt were just long-winded, boring, and it was just kind of putting stuff in for the sake of it. I think kind of gave me the feeling that he was running out of stuff to say. But in terms of difficulty, it was good. Overall, it was pretty interesting. I think a lot of the stuff he says was true, and I agreed with, but not 100%. But yeah, I mean, if you're interested in know more about Benny and his story, I think I'd recommend it, especially if you're learning, reading it in a second language. It's not too difficult. But if you're looking at the book itself and you're talking about reading it in your first language, I probably wouldn't recommend it, because I don't think it was enjoyable enough in itself, just for that reason. And going on to book 7, again, this is another one of howdo.net, and I think this book is really not very famous at all. If I remember right, I was just scrolling through one of the pages on Howdo and just looking for recommendations, and then I came across this book, 双剑传说, and the name sounded cool and the picture sounded cool, so I clicked on it and downloaded it to check how long it was. All in all, 129 pages long. The first chapter was about 4 pages long, and it was 26 chapters long. I had a quick read of the first page, and the difficulty didn't seem too hard. And this was originally listed, I think, under the Kung Fu section, I think, of the Howdo section. So I thought it was going to be a lot of fighting scenes and stuff like that. But then I just thought I'd give it a go. So I started reading it, and basically this book revolves around the story of some, I think this is called an architect, and he's basically working at this excavation site, and all of a sudden they're digging up relics from olden times, and they suddenly come across these pair of twin blades that they uncover, and then a lot of it's around the mystery surrounding these twin blades. Do they have special powers? Do they not have special powers? The history behind them and stuff like that, and it's kind of just following the mystery as they go on and try to solve more and more parts of the puzzle, and then until eventually it all comes to quite an interesting climax at the end. And This book's not too difficult. I really enjoyed it. Obviously, there was still a lot of words I didn't know at the time going through it, but because I was reading on Kindle, I think it was good. I can understand enough to make it enjoyable to read. There's enough unknown words for me to look up and to keep it interesting and to learn new words and make cards and all of that. So yeah, again, I don't think this is a very famous book. I mean, I couldn't even find a Wikipedia page for it, but I enjoyed it. I think it's worth the read. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, I'd recommend checking it out. And again, it's free, so if you don't like it, then just don't read it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So this next one here was the story about teaching methods, and I'll just click on the book for Kobo here. And Kobo.com is a Taiwanese bookstore. You can buy ebooks from here, and you can actually download them and convert them to Kindle format. Again, I've already made a video explaining how to buy books off this and convert it to a format compatible with Kindle, so I'll put that in the description. But basically, I was in the library opposite the university, and I was going to pick up a new character practice book to practice writing characters. And then when I was in, I was just kind of looking at some of the books there and having a wander around, and I noticed this book, and I'm quite interested in education, learning in general, because I guess a lot of it's applicable to language learning and stuff like that. So I decided to read the blurb on the back, and a lot of it was talking about, imagine if, talking about how I think it was saying a lot of parents don't understand their kids nowadays, and it's just like, imagine putting yourself back into the position of the kid back then. What did you want then? What would you say? And it was, what would you want? How would you talk to your teenage self back then? And how would you solve all these problems and stuff like that? And it was really talking about education from a point of understanding the students and understanding the kids. And I thought that sounded quite interesting, so I just decided to buy the book online and give it a go reading it. And again, it was really interesting. This is actually the author's actually Taiwanese, so when he's talking about stuff he's talking about various cities in Taiwan, places that I've been to, which again, I always find it more interesting when it's like that. And this again, non-fiction book, not too complicated if you're interested in education, and a lot of it was talking about how to teach kids methods for, I guess, influencing them, for persuading them, and for just generally connecting with students and stuff like that. I find it quite interesting. And again, I can, even if it's not students, a lot of the stuff they talk about in this book is applicable to just good management of relationships in general. So yeah, I think it's pretty interesting, not too difficult. I'd recommend checking it out. And then the next book, again, number 9, this is a classic English novel called Lord of the Flies. Number 9 on this list, again from howdo.net, which is free, so again, you can download that and check it out if you want. And this basically, I've heard about the story referenced a lot, but I've never actually read it, the English one at least. So I thought, it sounded pretty interesting. It's about a bunch of kids that are on this plane, supposedly fleeing from some sort of war. They don't tell you which one it is, but maybe it's World War II. It's about that sort of time period. And then suddenly the plane crashes in this island. And then when the book starts off, there's these 1 or 2 kids that are on this island, and they don't know why they're there. They're kind of talking about what's happened. And then eventually the one kid, Ralph, and the other one, Piggy, decide to blow this show horn thing and get all the kids to gather around. And then they start building their own little settlement. They start building houses. They start building thatch, almost housing and stuff. Not like a proper house, but just basic tenting or whatever. They start going out rummaging for food, finding water, hunting and all that stuff. And it's just a story of how these kids start surviving on this island, and then again, how it starts off seemingly in order and everything under control, and how things just spiral out and out and out of control, and how seemingly towards the end of the book, the kids, spoiler if anyone doesn't want to hear it, and how you're going through seemingly these kids kind of descend more and more into madness and get obsessed with hunting throughout the book. And then towards the later half of the book, it actually gets quite dark, and a lot of things happen until eventually at the end the book finishes. So this book was really, really interesting. It was because this was always referenced as a book aimed for teenagers in the UK. I wouldn't think it would be that dark, but then after reading it, I was quite surprised at the graphic level of detail they go into to some of the more gory parts of the book. But all in all, again, it's suspenseful. It's got a lot of different characters. Some of them are quite funny. I really enjoyed it. Again, it's classic English novel, so you can always, if you're struggling to understand a chapter, you can always go to something like SparkNotes. And this is another tip as well, actually. When I read one of the chapters, I was a bit unsure on my understanding, so I literally just typed into Google here. Just type in SparkNotes Lord of the Flies, which is almost like a study note thing for GCSEs. And when I'd finished reading the chapter, I can't remember which one it was, one of them I was untoo sure what happened. So you go on the summary and you just click on the chapter notes, and then you can just read in English like a 3 to 4 paragraph summary of that chapter. And if I'm reading a book that's a famous English book translated into Chinese or Spanish or whatever, a lot of the time they have these sorts of things available online. So if you're reading it and you think a chapter you didn't understand very well, you can read something like that on SparkNotes and keep you aware of what's going on, because if you start to lose track of what's going on, it gets progressively more and more difficult to understand. So if you just spend like 2 or 3 minutes just reading a quick summary after you've read something, if you didn't think you understand it, you can either confirm you understand it, or you can fill in gaps in what you might have misunderstood, and then that improves your comprehension for the rest of the book. So you can either like read the chapter again or just move on to the next one. So I just moved on to the next chapter and carried on reading, and it was really enjoyable. So again, I thought it was challenging but not too difficult. And then the last book here is again, this is Taiwanese, and it's from howdy.net, so it's free, you can download it, and the Chinese name is 我们一起追的女孩. And this is originally, I was in my class and my teacher always pulls like pictures from random things onto put on the PowerPoint, and then she had a quote or a picture from this movie in there, because this has later been adapted into a film. And she said, I recommend watching this if anyone likes romance films. It's quite good. And she said there was a lot of swear words in the film, so I was like, okay, sounds interesting. So I invited some of my classmates around my house to watch it, and we watched the film. It's pretty good. And then later, after I watched the film, I decided to read the book, and again the book was really good as well. And this novelist, Jiao Ba Dao, has a lot of other books as well, and I don't think they're written at too difficult a standard, to the point where I can understand a lot of it without looking stuff up. Obviously there's still a lot of new words that I can look up, but it's not like overwhelming. So again, this has got a film and a book, which helps. It's reference stuff that happened, like big events, like maybe like the earthquake that happened in Taiwan before, which is cool because you can get more of an idea of Taiwanese culture. Yeah, it's a romance drama, so it's not too complicated, and I get the feeling the author who writes this is super into like anime and stuff like that, because I think he originally said he wanted to be a manga artist when he was younger, and this is actually, so there's some references to some anime and things as well, if you like that sort of thing. And as well, this is actually the novelist's sort of autobiography, but written in novel form as the perspective of a different character. This is about him when he was in high school and university, an actual girl that he liked, and how things played out, and based sort of off his life. I think maybe changed a few names and a few other details to turn it into a novel, but for the most part I think it's actually what happened to him, which again is quite interesting. And the novelist, he has other books as well, so again I'd recommend it out, not too difficult, and if you're looking to get into more Taiwanese novels, I'd definitely recommend it. So they're the first 10 novels I read, and right now I'm reading one called Sha Shou, and it's by the same author as the one I just mentioned, Jiao Ba Dao, and that's a thriller. I think I've read about a third of it now, similar difficulty, and I'm really enjoying that so far. And yeah, just to take you through quickly, my reading list is split into different categories. So I've basically got novels here, some from English that I'm planning on reading that I've been translating. So you've got things like Of Mice and Men, which is American novel I think. You've got Howl's Moving Castle, which was a British novel before, both been translated into Chinese for free. I've got some thriller books I want to read, and when I write here Chinese novels, this is ones that are originally in Chinese, and and the ones I'm highlighting in green are ones that I think are easier. For example, this one I watched the drama of already, and I kind of know the plot, so that should be okay. Some of these are my friends recommended and I want to start reading soon. Harder just means more difficult ones like, Romance of the Three Kingdoms, Journey to the West, all this sort of hard stuff, Art of War. These will be way too difficult for me now. Light novels, there's some Japanese ones here, and there's actually some Chinese light novels as well, which I haven't read any yet, but it's something I may get into at some point, and there are lots available off Kobo here. Chinese web novels, these are free, you can check them out if you're interested. I've not actually read any yet, but it's something I may try in the future. Other novels, Animal Farm, Martian, Alchemist, whatever. And then here I've split it into some different book series that I've found links for that I've able to download for free. So Harry Potter, Robert Langdon is the main detective in the Da Vinci Code. So again, the second one here, the Da Vinci Code, is this one. I wanted to read that book for a while. I think I will read it in Chinese at some point, and I found a lot of his other series is available as well. And so if I enjoy the Da Vinci Code, I might read some of the other from the series as well. Witcher. This is one of my favourite video games, if not my favourite video game series. There also a really good TV drama on Netflix came out like this year or last year, and there's like 7 novels in the series, and I really want to read it at some point. So I found the link on Kobo. I'll probably go through that at some point as well. Game of Thrones, got the whole series for free here if you're interested. Lord of the Rings. Sherlock Holmes, my friend recommended Sherlock Holmes as a good thing for if you're learning a second language, because there is a few chemistry words and things like that when they're investigating, which make it a bit harder, but it's full of dialogue and stuff which make it a lot easier and a lot of natural language. So apparently that's really useful for learning languages. I found all 9 books available for download for free off here of how to do, so I'm going to check that out at some point as well. So yeah, and then for non-fiction, I've got some stuff about language learning, language instinct. I think Matt Professor Japan said he read it. This would be really difficult for me at this right now, I guess. Some other stuff, politics, some things about history. History, and then I've split it up into Chinese history, Taiwanese history, and just other history. So they've got like Sapiens and stuff here. Autobiographies, some things I want to read. This is here, How Fun YouTuber. He's actually a Taiwanese YouTuber, and he's written a book about how he's become a YouTuber and what sort of setup he uses. So I want to get into that, read that at some point. Again, this is a story about an American coming to Taiwan, working as a soldier, and how he's basically became and identifies as Taiwanese now. I watched his video with TK's story and found it quite interesting, so I'm going to read his. I want to read this at some point. And here you've got psychology, general science, some philosophy, just some other stuff in general, a lot of stuff to do with nutrition, some of it relating to like veganism, like how not to die and stuff like that, some other stuff to do with vegan, and yeah, that's it. So that's the breakdown of what I've read so far and some things that I'm considering reading in the future. Again, I'm updating this list of things that I'm interested in as I go, and I know I think there's over 100 books on that to read the list, and I'm not saying I'm going to read every one. It's just if I see something that looks like it could be potentially be interesting, I'll just document it and put it under that, and then at the time I'll just pick something off the list and read what I feel like would be most interesting or most appropriate for my level at the time, and then hopefully over the next few years as I keep on reading, it's going to become easier and easier, and then eventually I can just pick off whatever I want off the shelf and just read that, no problem. But I think for now it's still a while off that, 10 books, maybe after another 20 or 30, we'll see. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys found this video useful. I know it can be quite difficult getting into literature from another country when you're very unfamiliar with it, so hopefully it can give you a better idea of maybe what you can read if you're looking at reading more Chinese novels specifically. And if you have any recommendations for me as well, I'm always all ears. I really like hearing recommendations from you guys, so if you have anything you recommend read and really enjoyed it, then again let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the future. Bye.